Eric Ravilious is one of Towner's key artists. He is so important to us as a gallery and to Eastbourne as a place. So whether you're a newcomer to Eric Ravilious' work or whether you're familiar with it already, you'll be able to see that celebrated here. From watercolours through to his ceramics work, his wood engravings and the wood blocks from which he made those prints. The whole breadth of his work is on display. And we've brought it all together alongside the work by some of his contemporaries, such as Edward Borden, Peggy Angus, Tirzah Garwood, to show how important that moment in time was and the really important contribution made by those artists to modern British art. Eric Ravilious was a British artist. He was born in 1903 in London and very early on moved to Eastbourne with his father and his mother and his siblings.
It must have seemed wonderful to suddenly arrive at a seaside town if you're that age. I presume he would have come on a train. Would he have passed the Long Man of Wilmington? I think he probably first saw that from a train when he was very small, and that would have intrigued you when you were 5, wouldn't it? It would have been something you'd want to go and see immediately.
So following Eric Ravilious' time at Eastbourne Art School, he then got a scholarship to study at the Royal College of Art in London. His tutor at the college was Paul Nash, who had a great influence on his work at that time and on the work of many of his contemporaries, such as Edward Borden. But the principal of the college at the time was Sir William Rothenstein, and it was him that really promoted in his students that need to go out and take on these very practical commissions, so book illustrations or ceramic designs, for example. And I think that stood Ravilious in really good stead for his future career.
In 1928, Eric Ravilious and Edward Borden were commissioned to create murals in the Morley College refectory room. And this work that I have in front of me is Ravilious' design for the mural. It's a kind of a stage set, but it's set within a Sussex landscape. And we know this because right central to the piece is the Long Man of Wilmington, a chalk cutout drawing on the side of the South Downs. And then to the right we have the chalk pit, which was just outside of Lewes. And then behind the stage you can see the rolling hills of the South Downs. And this was an environment that Ravilious was so familiar with and that he spent so much time out in the South Downs drawing and painting. I think one of the advantages of coming to Towner and seeing these works in the flesh is that you can also follow in his footsteps and that you can go up onto Beachy Head, you can go and explore Cuckmere Haven and experience the landscape in which Ravilious worked. And actually, they've not really changed that much.
That love of place really comes through in his work. You can see how drawn he was to it, both in terms of the light, the landscape, the kind of topography. And even though he later in his life moved to Essex, he continually returned to Eastbourne and the surrounding areas to paint and continually found inspiration here. And I think holding these in our collection at Towner, in the place where they were made, is so important and enables our audiences to make those links between artist and place.
I think the place that really both my parents liked more than Eastbourne was a cottage on the South Downs called Furlongs, which belonged to a Royal College of Art friend of my father's called Peggy Angus. And that's where he went and painted most of his pictures, and it is a magical spot because it's completely alone on the downs and you can switch off from everything.
So this work here is a 1931 wood engraving called Sussex Landscape. This was not that long out of art school, and it was at art school he got introduced to wood engraving. And this work really shows the development of his skill from the 6 years since he left college to this point. You can see here the beautiful Sussex Downs in the background and this typical Sussex barn. But with the trees and the hills and the sort of detailing on the barn, it really shows off his skill at the fine lines of engraving, this mark making on the roof, the way he creates the shadows and the depth that he gets through the contrast of the kind of lighter areas and the darker black areas. It's so skillful, just such an incredible work.
I enjoy the kind of art detective part of my experience, and still there are things to discover. Suddenly I think, oh, well, that sketch that we've got, actually that relates to a part of this drawing. I've never noticed that before. Continuously throughout his practice, you see these reoccurring motifs and objects. So they might end up in a watercolour painting, or they might end up in a wood engraving, which then kind of transfer into his ceramic design work. You can see similar kind of motifs, but also the techniques that he uses. So within his watercolours, you see this kind of cross-hatching technique, almost like a slight resist. But then this mark making is also in his wood engravings. So there's this beautiful kind of relationship that flows throughout his whole kind of repertoire of work.
So Eric Ravilious was an official war artist, which was essentially a scheme initiated by Sir Kenneth Clarke to involve artists in recording the activities of the Second World War. Ravilious had a number of postings, mainly in the UK, but also some to Norway and Scandinavia.
He was very much in danger quite a lot at the time. I can't quite picture him sitting on a destroyer with people rushing all around him, and he's just sitting there painting. It must have been very strange.
His contribution to the reporting of the war is really significant. He was sadly also one of the first serving war artists to be killed in action in September 1942 at the age of only 39. We have always been keen at Towner to show how Ravilious fits into British art history and how he sits alongside his contemporaries, both those close contemporaries that he worked with, such as his colleagues at the RCA, but also in the wider art historical canon at that period. Towner also holds a number of works by the artist Tirzah Garwood. She was an incredibly skilled wood engraver herself and made some beautiful oil paintings, marbled papers. She was married to Ravilious. They met while he was a teacher at Eastbourne Art School and she was a student. They got together and got married in 1930 and were very collaborative in some of their practice. So they overlapped on a lot of their wood engravings. You see Tirzah's influence and some of her marble papering come into some of Ravilious' own work. So it's really nice for Towner to be able to show the two alongside each other for both its overlap and its similarities, but also its differences and their own interests. And I think that perhaps Tirzah's own skill and interests have come to light more recently, and people are also appreciating what a great artist she was in her own right.
I don't remember my father. I was about 1 when he lost his life in Iceland. I got the sort of archive dumped on me with loads of letters, and they sat there for years and years and years. And then I thought it would be nice to publish them, because that's really when I got to know my father, reading his letters. I got a bit fed up with everybody saying how wonderful my father was, so I published my mother's autobiography. And initially everybody was just interested in finding out more about my father, but now they want to know about my mother as well, which is a terrific bonus for me. it is lovely to have a permanent collection. It's very hard just to nail it on the head why I'm so pleased with it, but I am. It's very comforting to know that they're in a safe place where they will be looked after.